WWE has just recently added a whole bunch of wrestlers to the already overly long unemployment line. And while it's never a good time to lose one's job, some would argue that now is even worse timing than usual. However, poorly timed firings is nothing new for Vince McMahon, and 7 examples of which are the topic of this episode. Because today... Thank you so much for the support over on Patreon, Jesus FARROW. Okay, so I could easily fill this list with every recent member of WWE staff that has been featured in Endeavor, from Dan Matha to Kurt Hawkins and so many more. However, I'm not going to go that route, at least not entirely. Instead, I think it's worth pointing out some other examples of WWE firings that were timed so poorly that they could easily qualify for lyrics of a country western song. But even though I don't want to focus solely on the current list of recent releases, there is one name that I have to say is particularly noteworthy, and that name is... Mike Rotunda is one of the current WWE dismissals that I just had to highlight, especially since the reason for his standing out is a bit more lighthearted. Not to say that this situation is anything to laugh at, but just that one particular aspect of it is amusing coincidence. And since this topic is a bit heavy, I'll take the levity anywhere I can get it. And also, I know that the word going around is that he's been furloughed and not fired. Just to be clear. As many of you know, prior to becoming a producer for WWE, Mike Rotunda wrestled for WWF as Irwin R. Shyster, more commonly referred to as IRS. And with a weird sense of irony, WWE had its mass releases on April 15th, which is traditionally tax day in the United States, as it is the final day to file your taxes on time. Now granted, this was postponed this year, but anyway, I do think it's a strange coincidence when you stop to think about it. Oh, and V Infuso also informed me that Rusev was even fired on Rusev Day of all days. I mean, that's messed up. For many ECW fans, Dawn Marie was one of the definitive valets for the company, managing the likes of Lance Storm and Just Incredible. But then she moved on to WWE after ECW folded, and there, many would begin to know her for a feud with Tori Wilson as well as her first rivalry with Stacy Keibler, which began just as soon as Dawn was brought in. However, instead of how she entered the company, what is not as well known as it should be was perhaps how she left it. On July 6, 2005, Dawn was released from her contract while on maternity leave, and to make matters worse, she was even told that her job would be secure when she initially told them about her pregnancy. This ended with a lawsuit and WWE eventually settling with Dawn in 2007, which is kind of interesting when you stop to remember that Dawn Marie was originally brought in as Vince McMahon's legal assistant. Finding out that your significant other is fooling around on you is never good, but finding out that he's doing it with your boss's daughter is even worse. However, finding out that your boyfriend's cheating on you with your boss's daughter and then after you confront your boss about it, you get fired by fax, well, that's gotta be total devastation. And sadly, this is exactly what happened to CHYNA and WWE. Now, a series of other issues did surround CHYNA being released from the company. WWE was beginning to run out of ideas for her, and while she was offered a new contract with the company, she insisted that she was worth $1 million a year, which WWE at the time said was outrageous and unrealistic. This led to negotiations beginning to dry up as her contract was coming to a close. To make matters worse, she began suspecting that the angle between her then boyfriend at the time, Triple H, and Stephanie McMahon, where the two were an on-screen couple, might have been more than just acting. And when she approached the two about it, they fessed up and admitted that they were indeed having an affair. Years later during an interview, it was stated that after CHYNA informed Vince about what was going on, she went home and was faxed that her services would no longer be required, as it was determined that the situation was just a little bit too volatile and that the WWE wasn't big enough for all three of them. Now remember, even though WWE doesn't talk about her all that much anymore, and even though there are those in the industry that weren't that high on her to begin with, she was still an immensely popular part of WWE at the time of her release, making the timing of her firing all that much more peculiar. Another legend who ended the WWF portion of his career in the most abrupt way, Randy Savage was revealed to no longer be working for the World Wrestling Federation when Vince McMahon wished the Macho Man the best in his future endeavors on a November 7th episode of Monday Night Raw. At this time, Savage was still an active part of WWF. He competed in that year's WrestleMania and was a regular part of Raw's commentary team. Now, this was ill-timed not just because of how much Randy was involved with the company, but also because of the fallout concerning his dismissal. As a result of this sudden parting of ways, rumor and speculation began spinning around the industry and the fans, as there were claims that Savage was having an affair with Stephanie McMahon that began before she was 18 years old. Yes, this is another example involving Stephanie McMahon having an affair. Now, I'm not trying to claim any confirmation on the validity or lack thereof of these accusations, but I am simply pointing out that if it is false, the quick release of Savage only gave credence and possibly even created the rumor in the first place. On the other hand, if this did indeed happen, then the firing of Savage only worked to signal that something unusual had occurred and caused people to investigate and for these rumors and reports to surface, which if you're WWE and you wanted to keep this whole thing quiet, then you probably should have handled it in a much different way. And with this story still circulating around even now, I think it's safe to say that this is just another example of how timing is really everything. Let's go back to another series of unfortunate events, but this time let's look at Matt Hardy, and let's also go back to another example of wrestlers having an affair, but this time it's not Stephanie for a change. And as I'm sure you could have guessed, I'm talking about Lita cheating on Matt with Edge. Now, if you ask me, it was in poor taste that WWE flaunted the affair on screen as part of a storyline by featuring Kane as a Matt Hardy stand-in, especially when you remember that Kane and Lita's kayfabe relationship only started because Kane, in story, blackmailed Lita into cheating on Matt in the first place. Now, if you're wondering why they used Kane as a Matt Hardy substitute at first, it was because the real-life Matt Hardy was fired. Yup, not only did he find out that his girl cheated on him with his friend, but then his job decided just to let him go to top things off. And to make matters worse, in addition to all that, Matt never achieved the level of success that Edge did in WWE, and sadly, it was the heel turn from the affair that brought Edge to main event status in the first place. Okay, here's an entry that's a little more positive on love. It's not any more positive on the firing thing, but at least it has a happy relationship involved in it. When CM Punk and AJ Lee got together in real life, it led to the two getting married. And a wedding should be a joyous occasion and one of the happiest days in a couple's life. But with that being said, it's also a really bad day to get fired from your job. This was the culmination of a lot of factors. Punk was battling an injury and needed time off, but was met with resistance from WWE. As a result of that and other things, Punk decided to walk away from the company, and without showing up to work, Punk was formally fired from the House of McMahon. However, while that was inevitable, out of all the days to hand a guy his walking papers when he's walking down the aisle seemed like a very specific screw to turn, one that Vince McMahon has said was merely a coincidence. But even if that's so, you have to admit that the whole situation is highly suspect. And finally, we get to good old JR. Now, he tops this list because he actually qualifies to be on it not once, but twice. The more recent of the two occurred on August 16, 2013, when Ross was put in charge of an event for a WWE 2K game. Yeah, it seems like nothing ever really goes right for the series now, does it? Anyway, an emotionally distraught Ric Flair was there when things understandably went awry when it was noticed that Flair was intoxicated. As a result, WWE blamed Ross for the incident and released him from the company, feeling that it was him who lost control of the event. Now, of course, I'm not saying they should have punished Flair for this after going through what he did, but many will tell you that this was a terrible situation on multiple fronts, and putting all the responsibility and punishment on Ross's shoulders doesn't seem to be the fairest way of handling things, especially when WWE and 2K were the ones that set things up in the first place. And so, as the result of the perfect storm of incidences that lined up just this way, Jim Ross found himself out of a job. But this wouldn't be the first time for JR and WWE, because 19 years earlier, Jim Ross found himself fired from the then WWF only a mere 2 weeks after suffering his first bout with the affliction that would affect him for the rest of his life. However, to be fair, he was rehired soon thereafter, only to be fired yet again. But then rehired once more. Yeah, it's really no surprise that he's in AEW now is it? Well, there you go, a list of 7 unfortunate WWE firings. If you like this video, go ahead and give it a big thumbs up and make sure that you are subscribed to this channel as well as having your notifications working so you can catch these videos as soon as they go live. Thanks for watching, and as always, Dave knows.